This is an analysis of the poem Litany by Carol Ann Duffy. The poem is written in free verse, and it is a memory of an adult reminiscing back on a childhood memory. The poem is actually looking at the 1960s because that's when commercial products and consumers' goods were a big part of the middle class family life. So it's called Litany because it's actually using these like commercial products, and it's making them, holding them to a standard like we would in a mass or a church or like a religion, anything religious. So looking at the first stanza and the title, we look at the title, and a litany, for those of you that don't know, is our petitions during a mass, usually in a list form, and it's where the priest or whoever is saying the litany says something, and the clergy or the rest of the church will respond. So going off of the fact that like litany is list, we look at the end of line 1 and all of line 2, and it reads candlewick, bread spread, three-piece suit, display cabinet. Now those three things, which I'm going to show you images of right now. So the candlewick bedspread is, as you can see, a bedspread that's very old-fashioned. It's kind of based off like it said like George Washington-ish like. And then three-piece suit is just a suit with the long sleeve shirt, but it also has a vest, hence three pieces. And then the display cabinet is something you would hold china in. So during the 1960s, especially for the middle classes, these would be nice things that you could have as a consumer. And then now going off of this idea that these are consumer goods, we looked at stiff-haired and red smiles in line 3 describing the housewives. And stiff-haired would most likely mean stiff because of the hairspray that they use, another consumer product, and then red smiles due to the lipstick, another consumer product. So we're seeing this recurring theme of the consumer goods in these people's lives. And then it says passing the catalog in line 4, which is like one of the first parts where the whole litany with religious conflicts with consumer, because catalog could mean like a magazine catalog where you're looking at consumer goods, but also catalog could mean like a religious pamphlet of sorts that could be used either during Mass or outside of Mass. And following catalog in line 4 is the word Pyrex, just by itself, italicized, just like the other consumer products. So initially, right off the bat, you're going to assume, hey, it's probably a consumer product, which after I look it up, it is. It's kind of like, Pyrex is like a hard type of glass. It's kind of like Tupperware. So you would use it to store stuff, but you wouldn't use it in like your lunches or like to go. It's more like keep stuff in the fridge. So it's like this hard glass, and then it's used to like store stuff. So again, we see that all the consumer products so far have been italicized. And then it goes on saying about Mrs. Barr's American tan leg. And at first I wasn't sure what that was, but I kind of researched it a little bit, and a tiny ladder and the American tan leg. So it's actually referring to like tights. So Mrs. Barr's tights, but the tiny ladder is referring to there's like a tear in them, so it kind of looks like a ladder because it's stretched too far. So the tiny ladder ran up Mrs. Barr's legs, sly like a rumor. So there's actually a simile right there between a tiny ladder like a rumor. And then it's also connecting to the American tan leg, the tights. And before I forget, these two dots next to the end of line 4 and 5. I actually did dots throughout the poem at the end of lines like these, and and that's because these lines are actually enjambments. So an enjambment is a line that doesn't end in a punctuation. So and also line 1 would be like that, candlewick. And see, these lines, since they don't have these uh, punctuations at the end, you just have to read through the end of the line. So you wouldn't pause at the end of the line. Now, looking at the second stanza, remember how in the line 4 of the first stanza, the word catalog I pointed out was and just like litany was a connector between the idea of consumer goods of the 1960s and then religion or mass. So I also kind of did like squiggle cloud lines around the word marriages and engagement rings because these two words are also connectors between the idea of religion and consumer goods. So now, looking at the end of line 7 and the beginning of line 8, cellophane round polyester shirt. This is also a consumer good. However, unlike before, this consumer good is not italicized like pre-X and candlewick and the other ones from stanza 1 were. So we're a little thrown off because we go to marriages and then which kind of reminds us of religious marriage, and then we go to cellophane round polyester shirts, which consumer good, and then the lounge would seem to bristle with eyes. So lounge, the way the lounge is capitalized, it must be a reference to something, though I could not find what it was. Initially, I thought, because when I first read this, I thought this was all referring to like a religious setting before I looked up some of the consumer goods. So I figured the lounge was like maybe some religious setting, like maybe the the back area where a priest would like get ready before a mass, but I wasn't completely sure on that. So then, like, looking at the poem and understanding this idea of like it's based on consumer goods, the lounge is probably where because the poem keeps on referring to housewives, so it's probably where these housewives hang out and talk. So, like, an area in a house, the lounge. So they'd come over to someone's house and they'd all sit down and hang out in the lounge and talk and gossip and play bridge or whatever they do. So then we get the would seem to bristle with eyes, hard as the bright stones in engagement rings. So again, engagement rings is reference more towards you're thinking more religious, like, okay, they said marriages and now they're saying engagement rings, so I'm still on the religious, but it's consumer goods, and it's actually a simile between the eyes, how the eyes look. They're using the idea of the bright stones in the engagement rings to reference how the eyes look. Then we see the last line of the stanza, line 12, an embarrassing word, and then the last three words of line 13 in the third stanza. So, an embarrassing word like an accident. So, we're seeing that, and we can see that it's actually a simile between an embarrassing word, and then they describe the embarrassing word broke into bits, which is tense in the air like an accident. Now, looking at stanza 3, we're getting a little bit more of that connection between the religious mass and the consumer goods, because we're saying, this was the code I learned at my mother's knees. So, the code that I learned at my mother's knees, well, like thinking religiously, my mother's knees, you think of kneeling and praying. So the code that you learned was, okay, you have to be quiet, you have to pay attention, you can't squirm in your seat, like you have to be a good kid during the mass. But then it goes on pretending to read like in mass, but where no one had cancer or sex or debts, and certainly not leukemia. So those four things: cancer, sex, debts, and leukemia. So those are four things that in the 1960s, we have all these consumer goods, so life is supposed to be good. So you don't want to tell other people about the bad things in your life. So these are things that they probably wouldn't talk about at all. So the code that she's learning is not how to pray during mass, but it rather what to and what not to say in social settings. And I said she because I should have said this earlier. Seeing as this is an adult, like almost looking back at childhood memory, it seems like where I'm going to assume that the speaker of this poem is actually Carol Ann Duffy, and that it's a memory that she is recalling, and she's just recalling all the consumer goods of this time period. Going on, we see the last two lines of the stanza, lines 16 and 17. It talks about a mass grave of wasps and a butterfly. So these two, the wasp and the butterfly, actually juxtapose the whole idea of this consumer goods, because during that time everything was consumer goods. It was nice, it was neat, nothing was dirty. But the wasps and butterflies are from nature, and nature, even though it is beautiful, it is chaotic and it's not always clean. So the idea that these things are still in their lives juxtaposes the idea of buying all these consumer goods to make your life look nicer and easier and neater. So we have the dirty nature, and we have the clean consumer goods. Now this last stanza really it pulls away from the whole religious a little bit more, and it shows more of the consumer, like, social setting idea. So it's kind of it's showing us that this can't necessarily be in a church, because lines 19 and 20 say, "A boy in the playground, I said, told me to fuck off." Okay, well, during a church or a mass setting, usually you wouldn't have time to tell stories or, like, say random comments like this. So the fact that this comment is in there is already showing us that we're probably not in a religious setting, and it's pushing us more towards the idea, like the lounge. We're in a setting where Carol Ann Duffy, who I'm saying is a speaker, is with her mother or her family or someone, and she is reminiscing on this memory of the 1960s and how they just praised consumer goods, like they held them as high as religions. Now, in line 20 and 21, we get the words thrilled, malicious, salted, and an intimate storm. Okay, well, all of these are. So she just. The speaker, who again we're saying is Duffy, just said, "This boy on the playground told me to fuck off." Okay, well, since we're saying that she's a little child, um, we're saying, this girl probably shouldn't be saying fuck off, because they're probably not old enough. By the way that the language that they use, they're not old enough to, and the way they describe things, they're not old enough to to um, use this language and it be okay, especially since we have all these consumer goods. We're going to assume that they're a middle class family and they want to be seen as nice and perfect. So the fact that it's saying malicious and then salted my tongue and an intimate storm, we have the idea that the speaker, Duffy, is told this, like, one sentence story, in order to rebel. So she's trying to break free of this constraint of the consumer good world, and by rebelling, she's showing that she's a child, that she doesn't see she likes to rebel and doesn't need to be perfect all the time like this consumer good world. And then this is followed up by the apology in italics again. So in this last paragraph, italics is used as to show dialogue, versus we saw in paragraph 1 that the italics were used to show consumer goods. So she says she's sorry to all these women. So that kind of so all these women are in the lounge. So we assume that It's like all these ladies are meeting up together while the men are like off at work or whatever. So again, that just kind of enforces that, well, the speaker is Duffy because Duffy's mom asked her to come along and meet the woman and just like teach her how the social setting works. So then she says, I can summon their names. So it shows that this rebellion, she's using it as a way to almost feel powerful because she's she's first breaking the social rules and then she's showing that she knows all their names and this isn't her first time in the lounge setting. And then the last line, my mother's mute shame, the taste of soap. So we're seeing that she's being punished for the action of telling this story, and more specifically saying "fuck off." So my mother's mute shame. They're obviously we've determined they're in the social settings, the lounge, and so the fact that she said these words in this consumer good 1960s probably middle class house where they want to be seen as uh, perfect everyday people. The fact that she said this, her mother is just like so disappointed in her because she brought her along to be taught how to act. But then she rebels in the setting. And then the taste of soap just solidifies the idea of punishment because she probably washed her mouth out with soap. So, looking at the poem as a whole, real quick, we're saying that this is written in free verse. It's about Carol Ann Duffy's memory of her reminiscing on a memory during the 1960s, which was commercial products and consumer good era. And they are in a lounge, probably area of the house. And she's just describing in list form, like a litany, the different commercial products, and she keeps on um, using different religious uh, vocabulary, such as litany and marriages and engagement rings and other hints to show how much people during this era and time uh, praised their commercial goods just like a religion. And it's a memory of her rebelling against her mother